I'm Jay Lyman. I'm a librarian with the Seattle Public Library. I am so excited to be here kicking things off for this three-part series. Tonight is Creating a Portfolio Career in Life. Next Wednesday, we have Your Business Start Smart. And then the Wednesday after that, we have a program on franchising. So all three of these are going to be led by Jeff Levy. He's going to introduce himself here in a moment. And like I said earlier, we are recording this so that you can see this at a future date too. And we also will be making time at the end where we'll turn off the recording, and you can ask questions that you might not, if you don't want those to be on the recording. So welcome again, and thank you for being here. Jeff, take it away.
Great. And I assume you guys are seeing a slide that says creating a portfolio career in life and my name and then some contact information. Jay?
We sure are.
Okay, wonderful. Well, first of all, I always appreciate being hosted by the Seattle Public Library. Jay and I have had many, many years of doing seminars, working together. So it's really a pleasure, really is a pleasure. And as he mentioned, we put together a series of things that we feel are appropriate in the work environment and in the current career choice environment that people might find themselves in. Let me give you a little background as to why I do this particular talk. I spend a lot of my time doing seminars on starting a business, creating a business, things around a book that I wrote. I do talks on franchising, which is an area that I'm a franchisee, very much involved. But one of the folks that hosted me a number of years ago asked me my story. So how did I get to, at 74 years old, get to the point of having a pretty interesting work-life balance over the last 25 years? And as I explained the story, they said, you know, I think, Jeff, we can package this in a way to share some of your experiences and maybe help people who might want to follow, maybe not the exact same, but a similar path. And that's why this particular seminar came together. One of my challenges in it is, because it is revolving around my story, is to make sure that this isn't just about me. It's really about helping people think about bringing into their life things that would make it more balanced, more portfolio-like. So as we go through the presentation, there will be a number of questions I will ask you. I will perhaps ask you to write down your answers to them, or as I go through this, write down questions that you want me to maybe comment on, and we'll save them for the end, as Jay has said. So in terms of an agenda and expectations for the day, is I want to help people think about their career more intentionally, more strategically, meaning more you're in control. It's sort of the you 2.0 versus circumstance. And you know, I've been coaching people for over 20 years. And when I ask them, how did you get into insurance, or how did you get into finance, or how did you get into sales, or whatever their career is, typical answer is they met somebody years ago, they offered them a job in an industry, and they've just sort of stayed with that. But we may be at a point where we want to be more proactive. I'll talk a little bit about changes that might occur in your life at the different stages that if we think about that, might have an impact in the decision-making that you do and the choices that you make. I'll share a personal experience where realizing that you know, time on this earth is finite. We never know when it will end. So we want to talk about how precious it is and give you some tools to maybe think about shifting a little bit in terms of your own career planning. And when I say career, I'm not just talking about, you know, working in a corporation, working in your own business. I'm talking about the entirety of your life. I'll talk a little bit about fears, and then hopefully the takeaway today is that you think of ways of pivoting in the direction that's really important to you, that you're willing to fight for and have be your most important goals. I know we're not asking for questions during this, But if everybody's okay with that agenda, I will dive in and keep going. I assume everybody's okay. Don't be shy. You also have the chat capability. And so if there's something that's really burning, put it in the chat. We'll keep an eye out for it. So I see one chat there. Okay, thank you. And is your name pronounced Na? Or yes, okay, good. Okay. So first of all, I want to talk about the concept of who we are versus what we do. And this picture means a lot to me. Obviously, it's my wife and I. That's sort of the pre-pandemic beard. But it is me. And you notice I have two of my adult children, my grandchildren, and my father-in-law and my mom. All my life, I really defined myself by my work. And I'll give you a little bit of my professional background, which hopefully, it would show you that what I did would be considered impressive, but it was much less important than what I do. And as I got older, I started thinking more in terms of how do I want to relate to the people in my family? And it wasn't just thinking about a retirement age for my wife and myself, but it was thinking about being involved in the grandchildren as they got older. And I don't know how old you guys are or what's going on in your personal lives, but as I got into my 50s, I started realizing that my parents or my wife's parents hadn't done a great job in preparing for their senior years and what care they might need. So it really was one of the factors that impacted me and made me think of my life in terms of having broader responsibilities. I see a chat. Let me just do a quick check. Oh, how many generations? That's interesting. Good question. I would guess here there's got to be 3. So there's grandparents, parents, and grandchildren. So it's 1, 2, 3, maybe 4. Yeah, math questions not my best, but that's a great question. Thank you, Paul. Okay, so where I am, I mean, you guys recognize this picture. I do this seminar on a national basis sometimes. So I'm always proud to say I'm in the beautiful Northwest. It used to say Seattle, but after a while, people caught me and said, "Nah, that's not Seattle. That's Oregon." But unfortunately, live actually in downtown Seattle. I won't bore you with my background. I'll just list some of these things up here. And I always invite people who have attended these sessions to link in with me. And you'll find in the slide pack my LinkedIn profile. And if there's anything that in my background might be able to help you or make a contact, feel free to reach out. But my portfolio was having a business that created a sort of economic security for myself. It was writing a book that sort of represented my thoughts and a legacy that I wanted to leave for people I work with or future generations. I have been the president of the Executive Network of Seattle. I chaired the Bellevue Business Roundtable, and I can go on and on with that. I actually taught college for 3 years. So to me, that portfolio thinking was, how do I make sure that my work is more the lever or the fuel to allow me to do things that are important. I don't have on this list, but if you notice, well, I guess I do, it says travel and work from anywhere. Very important for me to be able to travel, spend time with my grandchildren and family. I'll mention there's a library book in here that you guys can borrow from the library if you ever chose to. And those of you who end up having a business as part of your portfolio life, I'd recommend that you go to the library and pick up a copy of the book that I co-authored. I'm also, we'll talk about sort of knowing ourselves in this presentation today. You notice I put myself up here with a number of awards that I've won. I don't know if I should be proud of that or not, but my personality is one that I love the pats on the back, and it is a bit of a motivation. And my book was rated a top 6 business book in the year it came out. So I said I'm going to talk a little bit from a personal point of view, and then I'm going to ask you a question that I'd like you to think about. Uh, I was raised by a single mom. Uh, it was not a great environment. In fact, we had to live with an aunt and uncle because we just couldn't afford the things. And my response to that was a couple of things. I wasn't the greatest student. I wasn't particularly motivated, didn't have a lot of encouragement. Um, and I also sort of created a little bit of an anger. But as I talk with you guys today about some of these things, as I evaluated these times of my life, uh, I wanted to pull out a learning moment. So the learning moment for me is that I can't change that circumstance. I cannot go back and change that, but I can change how I respond to it. And over time, sort of figured out ways of getting rid of the anger, et cetera. So my first question to you, and we're not going to do this live, but I'd like you to think about, has your upbringing impacted your decision making? Our upbringing is our foundation in life. And I want to suggest that, that anything I say today, if you want to ask me to expand on it, or even if you want to challenge something, please feel free to do that. Again, Jay and I do this for the benefit of the audience, not to hear ourselves talk. So again, I want you to think about your foundation as you were growing up and what your motivations were and sort of where they might have impacted the decisions and the choices you made. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. So I'm a transplant, but I have been in Washington State since 1984. One of the gifts I had when I was growing up is that in New York City, if you had an academic diploma from a high school, you were guaranteed a free 4-year college education. And if not for that, I would not have had the opportunity. I would have probably gone into the military immediately. My grades weren't so hot, but I was given a seat at one of the community colleges. And that was one of the times in my life where the light bulb went off. And I studied really hard and realized that I had a gift. And the gift was a very strong memory. And back in those days, when you go to school, the creative thinking wasn't necessarily what was rewarded. What was rewarded was the ability to absorb information. So I would do really good on tests and graduated pretty high in the class and ended up getting a nice step into a private college for my bachelor's degree. The other thing that really helped me a lot was recognizing the benefit of a mentor. And again, we're not going to be able to really discuss this now until later, but are you on the lookout for mentors? Have you found people that care for you, see something in you that you might not see in yourself, that are willing to put a hand out and help you? One of my professors happened to be a Spanish professor, Mr. Santos, saw something in me and suggested I apply to it was interesting, the Jesuit College of New York. Now, I'm a Jewish kid from Brooklyn, so it couldn't have been more far afield than my vision, but it was something that really affected my life in that there was a value system that came out of that college experience that's really been important. So my learning moment from this particular stage is being on the lookout for opportunity and realizing that there isn't always a straight line between where you are today and where you want to be. Sometimes you need the vehicle, you need the support, you need the understanding of what your gifts are so you can apply them in the right way. So always be on the lookout for opportunities and realize that they may be stepping stones than immediate results. I'm going to just take a look at the chat for a second, make sure I'm not doing anything wrong. Oh, that's great. That was very kind of Jay. Jay posted my book in the library. I'm very happy to have my own Dewey Decimal number at a reasonable age in my life. So this is an important point. I mentioned that this sort of background in life was not a great foundation, not a lot of support. And so the way I reacted is I began my career running from things. In other words, I never wanted to be in a position where I couldn't afford to send my kids to camp, or I couldn't afford to take them skiing or whatever. So I just focused 100% every fiber of my body in terms of working. And it's, as I say in this slide, it's amazing how far you can go from scarcity, if you're running from the scarcity. And I did start to find out in my life that that would get very tiresome. But again, I'm a kid from Brooklyn, bachelor's degree in education. I was going to be a teacher. And if you look further in my career on my LinkedIn, I've been an officer of a public company in town. I've been a president, chief operating officer of a company. So my learning moment here is that it is much more productive to run to something than running from something. And so I want to talk, as I get into sort of the tools I used, what a pivot could mean from you. You can be the same person with the same gifts, with the same skills, but instead of your motivation being having a negative, if you start thinking about how do you set goals for yourself, how do you evaluate your internal gifts, your internal values, and you're moving towards something, I think that creates excitement, perhaps less energy spent, but much more, the word I want to use is you'll be much more motivated to move forward. Now, as we go through life, things happen that sometimes throw a monkey wrench into our lives. And I'm sure these have happened to everybody. Similar things have happened to everybody. We have loss, we have divorce, we have things of that nature. And I want to talk about how we react to them. So not surprising, I got married young. After 5 years, ended up in divorce. It was not great. Again, it was the low self-esteem. I'm glad to report to this group that my dear wife, Andrea, and I have now been married 43 years, second marriage, so there is hope. I almost died from choking on food once. And I mentioned that experience on this call, not that I would encourage any of you to have a similar experience, but my sharing with you is that I learned from that instance that every day is so precious and my time was so precious and you never know when it might end. And fortunately, somebody did the Heimlich maneuver. It's someone who I'm still very dearly close to today, but they saved my life and made me appreciate the value of time. The other thing that happened to me is I found myself at 50, let's say 52 years old. I was the executive vice president of a company that I had helped found. We were doing exceedingly well. My partner and I had a vision for where we wanted the business to go. And we had some investors that decided that they wanted to go in a different direction. And those investors had more control than we did. And our choice was to either stay and do something that we didn't believe in or leave. And we both chose to leave. So at 53, I sort of found myself in this position of having to recreate what I wanted the rest of my life to look like. And so there was a learning moment there. Again, the learning moment was, this was again the scarcity versus abundance. And could any of these things have just knocked me down and not strengthened or encouraged me? And in reality, I started looking at the world differently. I started looking at abundance, and I had a very supportive partner. My wife was extremely supportive. And when I was sort of forced to leave my company, and when I say forced, it was do it the way they wanted to do it. Well, it wasn't that exactly. It was do it the way they wanted to do it. That was my choice. And I said, no, I can make a choice myself. I can leave and recreate life going forward. So my question to you, and again, I'm asking these things for a purpose, hopefully it'll become a little more clear, is have there been life-changing events that were significant enough that shaped your perspective on how you look at the world? And again, so you don't forget, perhaps make a note, and when we're off recording, I'd love to hear and hear you guys share. I'm going to take a little drink of water, and then we're going to keep rocking and rolling. So at 53, again, I found myself not working. It was sort of a difficult time, I will tell you, because if any of you have invested in a business, sometimes we sort of throw everything in, and I had thrown everything into the business. So all my net worth was in there. And if my business partners had just cut me off, we would have been in a tough go. And my wife was back in school, actually getting a doctorate at the University of Washington. My youngest was in college. It was a difficult time to be just sort of out in the street. Fortunately, my business partners worked with me to have a reasonable transition, and took 6 months to a year, but they bought the stock that I had in my company. But if you think about being in that situation where I'm now out of work, didn't know where any income was coming, wife in school, son in college, my wife gave me the best advice that I've ever had in my life. And she said, no matter what the pressures are, think about who you are, not what you've done. Think about these next 25 years of your life, and what do you want to have in them, and what are you willing to commit to and sacrifice to and put effort in to see those things happen. So the method that she suggested, pardon me, was get a journal, and not have the journal be about putting together my LinkedIn profile or my 30-second elevator speech, or my social media presence, which actually back then there was no social media presence. But it was just think about what is going to be important in these next 25 years. And the way my mind worked, I started thinking about, I have to set goals. I've got to think about what those goals are. And again, they were more than just getting a job. And I was willing to put in a significant effort. And again, I don't know how old any of you guys are or girls are, but I will tell you that the older we get, the harder it is to be motivated. You've got to have the right reasons to sort of go after change, go after pivot, to start let's call it a U 2.0. So I worked on this journaling. I worked on the journaling, did not think about occupation. And my learning moment from this, and if I think there's any, I'll try to point out what I think are important takeaways from this chat with you, is that I recognize that having a plan B was not productive. A plan B was an escape hatch because my plan A for my life was not well thought out enough. And of course, a plan is not something you achieve the next day. It's something you're always working on, always improving, always moving the goalposts back. So I threw out the idea of a plan B. And so in the last 25 years, I've had a vision of the things that I want to have in my life. And I have measured literally my daily decisions as to whether they're getting me closer to those things or taking me away from those things. So the first thing I did, and here's maybe some of the tools that I created for myself that I would suggest are not easy to do, but worthwhile doing. I felt it was important to really think through, who I was as a person. If you were to meet 5 people that knew me professionally or personally, how would they describe me? What are the values that they would say represent Jeff Levy? And again, these don't have to be your values. Your values might be different. But I put down the things that were important to me, and then I tried to describe them. And sort of that became my foundation for the choices I was going to make. So for example, if something challenged my ability to be ethical, I wasn't going to do it. If something didn't have a goal element in it where I could objectify the potential for results or returns, then I wasn't going to do it. So it's a very simple format. You guys can work on it yourselves, but think about the values and how you want to be defined. And I'll be suggesting a book before we're done today that can help you with it. Then the next thing I did, and this literally is 20 years old. It's not current, but I wanted to share with you what I had put down as my expectations for the business side of my portfolio life. And the reason that is sort of a cornerstone. I was not independently wealthy. I was able to sell my stock in my company, but it gave me maybe 2 years to have the flexibility to start something new without financial strain. I was very blessed to have that. But my suggestion to you is that you want to bullet point out some of the key cornerstone pieces that are important to you. And again, many times they will come around to be work-related, but my caution is don't allow the work to become your life. Now, maybe I'm being judgmental there, but if I allowed work to become my life, then it would have pushed out my time with my family, time for my health, time for my friends, time for my community, and to pursue things that I could not have done before. So think about those goals that are going to be important to you as it relates to how work fits in. Now, if you're starting a business, and some of you might have to, for the first year or 2 or 3, really have the work be a bigger part of your life until you can get the business working for you. And in my next sessions, I'll talk about those kind of things a little bit more in depth. Okay, so I think a realization has to be: are we taking a snapshot of really where we are in our careers today? And we have to be honest with ourselves, or have a mentor that's caring but honest. And I think at some point we get to a point where we're just not getting any higher in terms of a career. A very wise friend of mine pointed out that in a career, you're in one of 3 stages. You're in the creative stage, you're in the implementation stage, or you're in the maintenance stage. And if you're working for someone else, if you're always creating, then your longevity in that job is probably greater. If you're just implementing, then the company will likely look at how do we do it more efficiently. And if you're maintaining something, you should probably be looking for your next step. So I also want to share with you some very current data that resonated with me, because it reminded me why people have to be thinking about this sort of portfolio life or career focus different than before. So Barclays Bank did this comparison of 20th century life cycle versus 21st century. And let's sort of focus on the 21st century. People are having children later, they may be starting their careers later, but you see this break that's happening in our mid 50s, early 60s. 50% today of people 50 years or old are going to lose their job, no fault of their own, and not necessarily recover economically. I'll make sure you guys have that data as well. So thinking about our careers, thinking about this maybe extra 20, 25 years that we may have, and how can you pull things into it that are really important rather than just work for work's sake, I think is what makes, that's what motivates me to come and talk to you guys about this subject. This is that study that about the 50% of people 50 years or older. You'll have it available to you in the slides. Let me take a quick drink. If you notice, I do talk a little bit about in balance some of the things going on in the work environment, because I've interviewed and coached so many people that define themselves by the work they do and not who they are. And then if they lose their job, it's like the lights go out and they're lost. So I want to just talk with you guys about the fact that in the workplace today, there probably are less opportunities for investment. Organizations are pretty flat. Whether we're going into a recession or not, I don't know, but companies, as we know, are taking advantage of it by these layoffs that we're seeing. There's a lot of politics in business today. The whole pace of change at work has shifted. And if you're not on your game, if you're not planning for your future, you can be left behind. And the other thing, and I actually have a book recommendation for you guys, you need to find support and growth outside of work. And again, here's where I would congratulate all of you who have taken the time to come today, because I think we're talking about things that are maybe broader than just, how do you survive at work? How do you get the next promotion, et cetera? So I think I've used these words before. If you look at your career coming out of this talk today, I would like you to be more intentional than circumstantial in terms of setting a foundation of who you are, what's important to you, and then what your goals are. There's a couple of tangential subjects that I want to address in this seminar today that I think are really important. It relates to some networking and books and maybe your own writing potential. I won't, if we were together live, I'd ask for a show of hands. How many of you actively go out into the community and network to look for opportunities? Hopefully everybody would be raising their hand. I had a lunch today with a lovely person, and just exploring ways where we can help each other was very significant, very gratifying. I do think in our community, and this I'll include Iowa in this as well, and Tacoma for sure. You have to get out, and we're out of the pandemic. I think people are getting to meet people in person again. Give people the gift of your presence. Put them before you. Take the concept of speed dating for business contacts out of your vocabulary. And these are things that I've done that have really supported my ability to have this very broad portfolio life activity. Become part of your community. I don't have the time today, but I've worked during the George Floyd and Black Lives Matter activities going on. I looked at ways of serving the community in ways where I could apply some of my skills. And it was really important in terms of broadening my portfolio. Simple acts of kindness will stand out, and people will go out of their way to help you if you go out of their way to help them. There's a famous book by Dale Carnegie that says you can get anything you want in life if you help other people get what they want. And of course, model the behaviors that you expect from people. And I probably should put this in red or highlight it, but time is finite. If there are people that are energy vampires that sort of suck the energies, suck the vision, the optimism that you have about your future, it's okay to not spend time with them. Certainly if it's family, it's a little bit more challenging. Okay, somebody just asked me a question, which I will address, the idea of speed dating out of your vocabulary. The concept of speed dating today is if you're looking for a date, they put you in a room and you spend 5 minutes at a table with somebody and you make a decision whether or not you want to spend time with them. In the context that I'm talking about, if you get into a group where you're networking with other people for business contacts, et cetera, I'm just suggesting that before you make a quick decision as to whether or not that person can help you, in the conversation, get to know them and think about how you can help them. And it does tend to come back around. So if I haven't adequately addressed that, let's leave it again for the Q&A, and I'll try to clarify an answer to your good question. Okay. Couple of books that I would suggest very strongly. And again, we have to build our own networks. And my professional network, my personal network is one of the things that I cherish most. These books will help you think about how to create those networks. So Never Eat Lunch Alone, Who's Got Your Back. They're all best-selling books on creating local networks. Okay, great. Okay, I was just checking a chat. Hold on a second. Okay. Now here's where I normally ask if anybody on the call has thought about writing a book. And I'm not going to ask you to entertain the answer right now, but I would like to hear about it later. And of course, since we are hosted by the library, writing a book you might even get your own Dewey Decimal number someday. I never thought of writing a book, but a young man who I had tremendous respect for, he was the Small Business Administration Entrepreneur of the Year nationally, but he did not have an MBA or any credentials. And he came to me and he said he wanted to write a book. Would I help him from a credibility point of view in his career? And as we talked, I thought, that's not my goal, but if I could take my ideas and put them in writing and something that had value, then it would be more of a legacy for me. So if you're thinking about writing a book, it can be significantly helpful for you in your career. If it's a good book, you become a subject matter expert. People will listen more tentatively to you. And in my case, it actually was a representative of my life work. And it opened the door to teaching, which I had always wanted to do, but had not done. So my book became used in a number of universities or as a guest speaker, but it also became the curriculum for a course I taught in Seattle. I can talk offline. If anybody has an interest in the book side of things, glad to talk in a separate conversation. I had a co-author, very humbling experience because we would really struggle to have the ideas that went into the book be on their merit, not on I couldn't play the age card. We had to really look at what the value was of our contribution. So 1 second, I'm just checking chat. Okay, Jay's asked me to go back one slide, and he's going to take a shot of the books, and I'm sure that they're in the library, so he's going to list for us how you can find them in the library.
Got it. Thank you, Jeff. I got the first one, and I'm doing the second one now.
Well, that was quick.
I've done this before.
That was quick. Okay. So just the purpose of my book, and I just mentioned it too, if any of you are thinking about being in your own business, I believe that there's some pre-thought that you have to go through to be ready to make that jump. And that's really what the book is about. I'll give a little pitch for the self-employment thing. I don't think I would have had the ability to do the things that I have done or the things that are really important to me if I had not been in my own business in some form. And I'll share a very personal experience. When I had left my company and I was 53, I was spending a lot of time at home, a lot of time with my children. And when I started going back into my own work world, my oldest son took me aside and said he liked me better when I was not working. And that was a very crushing statement because I thought my value to the family was my working and financial contribution, and realized it wasn't that, it was my time. So I do want to just put a little plug in for the self-employment. First of all, anybody in Washington State knows that we are self-employed anyway. We're an at-will state, so companies can say, we love you, but we're going to miss you, and they can lay you off. There's a significant amount of opportunity and creativity in starting your own business. franchises are an option. And again, I want to encourage anybody that's here today to please attend my next 2 sessions, which will go into this more in depth, and maybe bring a friend or someone who you think might benefit. And my other comment is that if you are thinking about going into your own business, don't let somebody rain on your parade. They will do that. And people typically will say, oh, you don't want to do that, or you don't want to buy yourself a job, or all the excuses they can give you. And sometimes that comes out of their own fear of not making that jump themselves. So some closing insights before I give you a couple of other books to read. And Jay, I'll hover to give you a chance to capture them. Is first of all, recognize that we all have blind spots. We just do. And if you're fortunate enough to have true friends and true mentors, encourage them to give you feedback, give you suggestions, because we have blind spots. And if you don't, I've heard people say that, if you're the smartest person in the room, that's not good. It just means you're in the wrong room. You expand yourself by being challenged. Work on who you are versus what you do. So one of the takeaways from today's talk is to really spend some time thinking about your value system and your legacy. And just don't regret things because you're afraid to do them. And there's a risk reward balance, and I'll probably talk more about that in my other seminars, but you'll never make dramatic changes in your life if you're not willing to take some reasonable calculated risks. So Jay, get your pen ready. This is a good book. I'll cheat a little bit, and then I believe this link on the bottom is live, and that takes you to a fairly, well, the New York Times has sort of changed their policy a little bit. You may have to have a subscription to get the article, but it's a book written by a very respected author and editor who talks about not our resume, but what do we want to have in our life that's really important, that will make a difference to us and to the world. So it was a very impactful book for me. Jay, did I move too fast? Jeff to Jay?
All good. I got it.
Okay, good. Okay. And then about 2 years ago, my wife suggested this book to me. It was probably a little late, but it still had some value because it's called The Third Chapter. And it talks about, when you hit 50, what are your opportunities for passion and reflection in this next 25 years? And the book is a series of vignettes. So it's not just one theory from a writer all the way through. She interviewed people that in their life made significant changes at that watershed age of 50 years old. So it's one that I would recommend considering as well. And I'm going to go to this. So what are your next steps? What do you guys do from here? And then when I'm done in a moment, I'm going to turn this over to Jay, who will talk about tools available to you in the library that might help in your journey. The next steps is to be very honest and practical with yourself. And when I say that, we talk a little bit about your value system, but also inventory your skills. What are those things that you naturally do well, that you're trained in, that you're educated in, that you can apply to something both in a business or in your community or to your family or to your friends that will make a difference? Think about balancing risk and reward. One of the things I have experience with is doing these communication style assessments, and a very large percentage of us are afraid of risk, afraid of change, afraid of doing something different. And that's a very natural, response. And, we all have am I going to fight this and work through it, or am I going to run away and ignore it? But realize that to make change, you have to expect some level of being uncomfortable, some level of risk. And at least as it relates to a business, I'll be talking about how do you mitigate that risk in a future talk. And then, of course, I don't have to say it to this group. You obviously are lifetime learners. You took the time to be here today. It's greatly appreciated. And hopefully today will be a time when you start thinking about your next steps, and some of the ideas I've shared today will help you grow. My last slide, and again, after this talk today, I will send Jay this complete packet, and then he can email it to you. You have my email there. If you do send a message to me for some reason, just please identify how we met. I do a lot of talks on different subjects, and I certainly would want to know that you guys came through the library. I've got my LinkedIn profile there, and also my business webpage, which just informational purposes only. And I want to personally thank you guys. I'll be hanging around and enjoying Jay's talk. And let me just check the chat quickly. Oh, the chat is Jay's contribution to the books. Great. I'm going to do a stop share, Jay. Would that be correct?
Yeah, that works.
Okay. And there we are. Hello, everybody.
All right. Well, we will. I'm going to cover a few things based on. I'm going to sort of riff off of what Jeff has been talking about here with some library tools, and then we'll close out the recording, and then hopefully we can have a discussion and talk and get Q&A and things going at that point too. So I'm going to share my screen. So give me a moment here. Can you see the library's webpage? Does everybody see the Seattle Public Library's main webpage? Okay, cool. Great. So as I was, listening to Jeff talk, I knew there was a few things I was going to cover, but I thought of a few more too as well. And as you could see, I was peppering the chat with books and things, and libraries are known for books. Like, we come by that honestly. We love them. they still work. But we have other kinds of resources as well that I'll share with you here today that you can access for free. So I'm on the library's webpage. I'm going to go to our online resources. And then under our online resources, we have this business finance fundraising. And the other one I want to share about is this online learning. Actually, the start of online learning, because I think, as you're thinking about that, that career or that entrepreneurial endeavor that you're embarking on, often you run up against some sort of roadblock. And when that happens, you can sometimes learn your way around it, or figure out that one thing that you're trying to overcome to move to the next, step of stuff. One of those tools that I go running to most often, LinkedIn Learning, the library. So this is not the free version of LinkedIn. This is a version that the library subscribes to on your behalf. So start at the library's webpage, not at LinkedIn, because otherwise it's going to ask you for some information to get you logged in and things. Some of you here might not be from the Seattle, might not have a Seattle Public Library card. Maybe you're not from the area, but most of or many libraries also subscribe to this tool. And if you don't have it through your direct library, there are also these reciprocal agreements. So you might be able to find a nearby library that has an agreement with yours, so that you can actually get a library card from that area. So, for instance, Seattle Public Library has a reciprocal agreement with King County Library System, Timberland Library System, Pierce County, with Kitsap, Snow Isle. So, you can actually get cards from all those places. and then have access to their remote tools with the library card. You don't need a library card to subscribe to our programs or any of those kinds of things, but to access the tools, we license those. And so that's where that library card comes in. Just like when you're checking out a book, you know, the library owns a license to lend that book to you throughout there. So yeah, and there's a note in the chat that yes, you can save yourself $40 a month by using the library's subscription to LinkedIn Learning instead of going out and paying for it yourself. And if you ever have questions about like, how do I get a library card, or like those reciprocal agreements, that's where me and my colleagues come into play, and we're happy to help with that, as well as how to get into the tools. So if we click on LinkedIn Learning from here, well, I'm in the library, so it'll just let me in. That's another option too. You can actually come to the library and get these things. But if you're outside the library, as you know, most people when they're doing this kind of work are doing it remotely, then you need the card to get in. As you can see, there's other tools here. Language learning, Mango Language is a great one for that. Microsoft Imagine Academy is another one that we get, and many other libraries in the state of Washington and probably beyond get access to that, so that you can get the latest on those. And there's others as well, that other kinds of learning tools that we subscribe to that could be valuable. I also wanted to mention, so we talked about the LinkedIn Learning and all the different learning resources. If we go back to the business, finance, and fundraising, there's a whole bunch of tools here for the entrepreneur, and also honestly for job seekers too. If you find that that maybe you're straddling both fences, or maybe you're clearly in one or the other, there's a lot here to benefit you. One that I really wanted to point out here is at the bottom, called the WOIS, the Career Information System. And that's Washington Occupation Information System. What I love about this is that it's localized data, so local to the state of Washington. There's other tools out there. There's one called ONET, there's Occupational Outlook Handbook. Those are all like national tools. They even have some local numbers. But what I like about with this one called WOIS is that it's got local data about Washington State. It also, Jeff was talking about some taking assessments and things. There's an entrepreneurial assessment tool that you can answer these questions, and it'll give you a score on whether or not this, does this seem like a good opportunity for you? Are you going to be happy doing this? And there's others there too. I actually, incidentally, I did actually score high on the entrepreneurial assessment factor. So I guess I'm amongst colleagues here, even though my work is more intrapreneur. But there's other interest profilers, this career cluster kinds of things. Another one, and the way that I use this tool even more than the assessment tool, is this career exploration part of it. So if I go over to careers and then browse from there to, I can go in here and find out, what does a advertising salesperson or an agricultural engineer, any of these kinds of occupations, first of all, what do they do, and so let's just find one here. Oh, here's aircraft mechanic. So we get, their wages, we get some things about the tasks of the job. What's really cool about this is that it also is local information. So it's not just, generally what do airplane mechanics do, but also what's the median wage for an aircraft mechanic in King County? How many openings are expected to be in that career? How many current opportunities are there? And so you can really get a sense of, is this a good idea for me in this geography? WIS is my go-to for if you're in Washington. If you're outside of Washington, the other two that I mentioned earlier, ONET or Occupational Outlook Handbook, really great tools as well. But this one has the added benefit of having those forecasts of how many positions are going to be opening, as well as some wage information. Yeah, here's the wage stuff. So for this one, you can see the differences US wide to local places. And it also, the other cool part of this is that it also links to, let's say all of that aligns to yes, ooh, this is what I want to do. Then you can go to the education and training tab, and it'll tell you what training do you need, and here's the certification, and here's the schools that offer that training. So it can really help you sort of understand the universe there of how to change from your course from where you're going right now to take some control and move yourself into a career that hopefully you'll enjoy. So those are some of the big ones that I wanted to point out. I will I hope all of you also are signed up for next week's Your Business Start Smart, because that's going to be an amazing one too. We're going to dive into some more details about what it takes to start a business, but I'm also going to share about some of these other tools here that we offer, what they do. I won't go into a super detail because we won't have time for that, but we'll at least cover a few things there. And then in the last of the three here, we also have something on franchising, and I'm going to save back some things to share about and in that one as well. Yeah.
What a resource. What a resource.
Thank you. Oh, and the other thing is too, if you are starting a business and you're I can't wait for that. These things, what do these tools do? Well, if you go to our programs and services, business and nonprofit, and you can make an appointment with me or one of my colleagues. We have these business information appointments where we'll walk through that tool with you based on what your needs are. And then we also have Jeff and I were talking about this a little bit earlier today, but we also have legal consults. These are consultations with attorneys who specialize in corporate law or intellectual property law. I'm so excited to be able to share that we are also offering some in Spanish on May 3rd. So if you know anyone that would benefit from those, please point them this direction. Those are corporate law. Often people ask us questions about incorporating. Should I be an LLC? Should I be a C Corp? Jeff's going to talk a little bit about that next week too. But this is where you can talk with an attorney about that in a confidential online 30-minute session. We got some real estate laws consults, and then intellectual property law. Those are the big topics that people ask us over and over. So yeah, register for one of those, and we'll answer your questions. They don't form an attorney-client relationship in that, so that means they're not going to do work for you. They're not going to review a contract. Can't get involved if there's a two-party dispute. But they're experts in these areas of law, so you can ask them questions, and you can learn a lot from them to understand how does intellectual property work? What is a trademark, and what's all those kinds of questions, and do that in a safe environment and for free instead of getting charged by the hour.